Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mario Cristobal, the Miami Hurricanes continue to work their way through spring practice. And the bulk of our conversation we've had around Miami is talking about the standouts, talking about the names that are starting to emerge during spring practice. This is not going to be a negative episode, but it's going to be a conversation of, hey, what questions do we still have around this Miami Hurricanes team going through the rest of spring practice? And it's, for lack of better terms, almost an early conversation in terms of what we would like to see Miami maybe address in the spring transfer portal window. You're hearing all the right things coming out of Miami in spring practice, but you still have some question marks that I want to talk about. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just a quick shout out to the Miami Hurricane fans. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas in the winter and in the spring months, talking spring practice, talking the recruiting trail, kind of getting nitty gritty around this program. The amount of support and feedback that y'all are throwing in the comment section is amazing. I continue to learn from you guys in the comment section. We got great conversations about ball in the comment section. I can't thank you guys enough. Appreciate it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, hey, what questions do y'all have around this team going in the rest of spring practice? Let it fly in the comment section. That's going to shape what we talk about over the next couple of weeks and months. Without further ado, let's get into it. I want to start with kind of a general thought that came to my mind when I was prepping this episode, and that is, you ain't got no question marks about the offensive line. And we're talking about a lot of different programs in spring practice right now. There ain't many programs that don't have question marks about the offensive line. You can tell that Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, this Miami Hurricanes program have invested a lot of time and resources developing and building an offensive line. We ain't got no question marks about the starting five. We feel good about some of the depth pieces we have. That's a really good spot to be in. We're going to talk about some other positions that maybe you have concerns about. You don't have any concerns about the offensive line, and that's a good thing, because if you got concerns in the middle of spring practice about your offensive line, chances are it just ain't going to be that good of a unit in the fall, because there are not going to be that many starting caliber offensive linemen that enter their names into the transfer portal in the spring, and they're going to be dang hard to get. And so a general thought is, being confident with your depth in your offensive line is a good thing. In Miami's, I feel like it's there. You're hearing all the right things about this offensive line halfway through spring practice. Now, the number one, and I think the most contested question that I think the Miami Hurricane, at least what I've seen on Twitter, on the message boards, are we good enough at the pass catcher position? Now, I intentionally included the pass catch, not wide receiver and pass catchers, because I think Elijah Lofton very well could be the best tight end in the ACC and maybe one of the best tight ends in the country. Many of the Miami Hurricane fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of weeks and months, and really going back to this time last year, know I am sky high on a guy like Elijah Lofton. But when you start looking at the wide receiver room, let's start with this. You're hearing all the right things. The concern about this wide receiver room has been significantly mitigated over the last couple of weeks, because you're hearing great things about Jojo. You're hearing great things about Malachi Tony. You're hearing really good things about Joshua Moore, too, who has flashed in a big way during spring practice. That makes you feel better about this pass catcher room around Carson Beck going into 2025. Now, on the flip side here is, hey, we know that we have the talent here. Jojo Trader, Malachi Tony, Joshua Moore, all guys that we've talked a lot about over the last couple of months. They are talented enough to go out and play in 2025 as young wide receivers. The question is, and this is probably something that we're just never going to get an answer to until we see it in 2025, is, all right, how far are they along in terms of between the years? Are they lining up in the right spot? Are they getting the proper depth on their routes? Are they doing all the right things between the years and understanding the offense? It's one thing to flash in one-on-ones in spring practice and have people talking about you. It's another thing during game day to get the audible from the quarterback, run the right route, block on the perimeter, do the small things that you have to do to get on the football field. We're not going to know that. And I guess one of the questions is it concerning for Mario Cristobal that really CJ Daniels is the only proving commodity in this pass catcher room? Again, the talent is undeniable with guys like Jojo Trader, Malachi Tony, Joshua Moore. Do we have enough proven commodities in this pass catcher room is certainly a question mark. And why I think this is such an important conversation is look at Carson Beck. If you put the pieces around Carson Beck like Georgia did in 2023 with guys like Brock Bowers and guys like Ladd, Carson Beck is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Now, in 2024, when he did not have those difference makers on the outside, Carson Beck was still way better than people like to act like he was still one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Don't get that confused. But his level dropped off pretty significantly. If you're Mario Cristobal, to maximize Carson Beck in 2025, if you're Shannon Dawson, you want to make sure you have the difference makers around Carson Beck. That's going to be a really interesting conversation to monitor for Miami. Now, my quick initial answer to this question is I would feel more comfortable if Miami just went out and grabbed one more proven wide receiver. And look, there are going to be good wide receivers that hit the transfer portal, and this offense is going to be a very attractive destination. 4 months ago, before Carson Beck committed to Miami out of the portal, it wasn't all that attractive. You had massive question marks about who was going to be the quarterback of this offense. You tried to get Eric Singleton, tried to get a guy like Zachariah Branch. Hard to convince those kind of pass catchers to come to Miami when the question mark at quarterback was so significant. Now you have a proven commodity in Carson Beck. I think it's going to allow Miami to be very attractive in the transfer portal for some of the top wide receivers that we see enter. And we'll probably have that conversation as it comes up and as we see what kind of wide receivers hit the transfer portal in the spring. Number 2, and this is kind of the second pressing question mark. And after this question mark, I don't have that many questions, but who's safety 2? You went out and got Zachariah Poison. Everything we're hearing from this kid in spring ball is he is your best safety on this team. You feel very comfortable about him being a difference maker at the safety position in 2025. Who's the second one? Zaquan Patterson's dealing with an injury. Obviously was inconsistent as a true freshman. Dylan Day's going into year 2. We haven't seen a ton from him. The one name that to me intrigues me is Markeith Williams, who, yes, I get is undersized, and he certainly looks undersized when you see the videos out there at spring practice, but is playing some really good football. And at this point, we're just looking for, hey, what safety can go out and grab this starting position coming out of spring practice? Now, do you have enough confidence in Markeith Williams to ride with this position group going into fall? My answer is probably no. Look, you went out and addressed so many different spots on this roster. Grabbing one more safety that we know is a proven commodity, and it doesn't have to be a Caleb Downs, and you ain't going to see no Caleb Downs in the transfer portal. But can you go grab a guy that's played a lot of football that we know is going to give us a higher floor in this room? Because as of right now, we know what Zachariah Poiser is. But outside of that, there's question marks about what we have. And if you're going into 2025 with a big time question mark like that, opposing offenses will look to attack it. And so I'm looking at and saying probably wouldn't mind seeing one more proven safety maybe being added in the spring transfer portal window. But you're hearing good things about Markeith Williams, which I think is very intriguing. Number 3, and this is going to really excite me as the pads start to come on. We're going to get a better feel for this. Just how good are we on the defensive line? This is look, there are a lot of intriguing storylines for Miami coming out of spring practice. Jojo Trader, Malachi Tony balling out, Jordan Lyle emerging as a dude at the running back spot. The secondary clearly much better, specifically at cornerback. A lot of things to be optimistic about. I don't know if there's a thing I'm more optimistic about than this defensive line going into 2025. And it starts with your proven commodities. Ruben Bain. Ruben Bain was just not healthy throughout the duration of 2024. He's a pretty damn solid player, but he didn't necessarily take the step we all expected because of that injury. Got his body right a little bit, lost a little bit of weight. Everything that you're hearing is he is back to that destructive mode that we saw him as a true freshman. If people are sleeping on Ruben Bain because they kind of just forget about him. You might see that Ruben Bain that's just a legitimate game wrecker like we saw as a true freshman. Then Akeem Mesidor. I mean, this is really his first full offseason healthy in a very long time. Last year he played very good for Miami last year, kind of moving around that defensive line, but I don't think he was, back 100% healthy until fall camp. What does Akeem Mesidor, who's been solid when healthy, look like with a full healthy offseason? That excites me. You're hearing great things about Justin Scott. You're hearing great things about Armando Blunt, hearing really good things about Ahmad Moten and Dante Simpson, who's a true freshman. Just how good are they? And we're going to get a better feel because guess what? They're going up against really good offensive line throughout spring practice and fall camp. As the pads get on and as we get into some of those full contact scrimmages, just how good are we up front? Because the best way to say you still have question marks about how good the secondary is, the best way to support your secondary is have an elite pass rush. And from what I see on paper, this defensive line has the ability to be elite in the 2025 season, especially if you get the emergence of guys like Justin Scott, Armando Blunt, true freshman Hayden Lowe. Last question. This is more just for me, it's a fun one. What is do we get? I guess what I'll say is, do we get a running back one that emerges? Now, is this that important of a question? No. Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lau, you could split their workload 50-50, and it's probably going to be a damn good running back room. What excites me about it is you got two really good running backs. Does Jordan Lyle, who y'all know I'm a massive fan of, been a fan of him since he was in high school, does he emerge as like a running back one? Because if he does, and if either of these running backs separate themselves in spring practice and fall camp, especially as the pads come on, you're not just looking at a good running back. You're probably looking at a great running back. And this is an important conversation because we know this offensive line is going to be really good. We know Elijah Lofton's a dog run blocker. The pieces are in place to have an elite rushing attack in 2025, and the cherry on top would be having an elite running back to accompany a very good offensive line. That's another storyline that I think is fun. Again, the questions that you have for Miami are not super significant. This is a very, very solid, balanced roster in spring practice, which I think should excite a lot of Miami Hurricane fans. We'll see kind of how it shapes out in the rest of spring practice. Again, to me, it's going to get real. We were in shells the first 2 weeks. We're putting on the pads, and it's going to get a little bit more physical for some of these young guys, especially on the line of scrimmage. Armando Blunt, Justin Scott, Hayden Lowe. Just how good are we? It is kind of what I'm looking forward to see over the next couple of weeks. We'll get more into some of these question marks. We'll get a really good evaluation come the end of spring and kind of talk about, hey, where do we need to go in the spring transfer portal window, which we know Mario Cristobal is going to be aggressive in. If there is a spot on this roster that Mario Cristobal thinks he needs to get better at, he's going to go address it. We'll cut it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.